an alien princess sworn to wipe out humanity, an ordinary mechanic with a heart of gold. What happens when the hunter falls for her prey? If my throne demands I trample these souls beneath my feet, then I'd rather die as one of them. Is love powerful enough to save an entire world? Or is it just a fleeting dream before the storm of extinction comes crashing down? Red warning lights pulsed across Alyndra's pale face, casting eerie streaks of color over her blood-stained features. Blood seeped from the wound at her side, soaking through the shredded remains of her royal cloak. Gritting her teeth against the searing pain, she reached out with a trembling hand to touch the screen before her. The rusted old starship shuddered violently, pieces of metal plating peeling away into the endless black. The screech of tearing steel blended with the blaring of malfunctioning alarms. "Final log of Princess Alyndra of Altharion," she whispered, her voice raw and broken. A harsh cough racked her body, spraying blood across the screen. "Main engines destroyed. Navigation systems offline." She paused, struggling to draw a ragged breath. Her deep, violet eyes, once the proud mark of the galaxy's most revered bloodline, were now dull and clouded, but the fierce fire within them refused to die. "If anyone finds this message, this ship, this body," Alyndra said, each word slicing through the thick, suffocating air, "tell my father this: I found something greater than the throne." A faint smile flickered on her lips, tinged with the salt of blood and tears. "I was taught that humans were nothing but lesser beings, that emotions were weakness, that their so-called civilization deserved nothing but conquest." The screen flickered, dimming for a heartbeat before sputtering back to life. Alyndra pressed on, urgency lending strength to her failing body. "But we were wrong. Our royal blood, our ancient wisdom, our towering technology, we missed the one thing that truly mattered." She tried to stifle another violent cough, but it tore free anyway. Blood spilled from her mouth, and this time, she didn't have the strength to wipe it away. Through the rising cacophony of alarms, she forced herself to keep speaking, as if every word was a battle against the dying light inside her. "For the first time in my life, I understand what it means to be willing to sacrifice everything, to give up everything, for someone not of my race, for a heart not born of my blood." The ship lurched violently. Flames erupted across the console, but Alyndra's eyes held no fear, only an iron resolve to leave behind the truth of her heart. "They call it love," she said, a soft, almost incredulous laugh breaking through her pain. "I mocked the idea until it became the only reason I had left to breathe." A deafening explosion roared from the ship's rear. Fire engulfed the cabin. Time was running out. "If you find him, Eliot of Earth, tell him I never regretted it, not for a single heartbeat." The red warning lights turned blinding white. The screen went dark, and in the silence that followed, only her final whisper remained. "For a single moment of living as a human was worth more than 1,000 years of existence without ever knowing love." 3 months earlier, soft blue light poured from the 3 artificial suns, bathing the city of Zenithia, the heart of the Altharion Empire, in an otherworldly glow. Towers of crystal and metal pierced the skies, so tall they seemed to brush the stars themselves, connected by transparent bridges that floated like ribbons across the open air. Alyndra stood on the palace balcony, gazing down at the empire her father ruled. Her platinum hair fluttered gently in the precisely calibrated breeze. Not too strong, not too soft, like everything else in her world, controlled to perfection. "Princess," a cold voice called from behind her. "The royal council awaits." Without turning, Alyndra gave a small nod. She wore the royal battle armor, sleek in silver, forged from the rarest materials in the galaxy. It was lighter than air, but could withstand the full force of heavy weaponry. Across her chest, the royal sigil, a 3-pointed star, shone proudly. When she entered the council chamber, the 8 most powerful figures of the empire were already seated around a glowing hexagonal table. At its center sat Emperor Zarek, her father, his chiseled face as still and severe as carved stone. "My daughter," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Come forward." Alyndra obeyed, standing tall, her head held high. From childhood, she had been taught, never show weakness, never betray emotion. A holographic display shimmered into the air between them, a small, lonely blue planet turning slowly in the void. "Earth," spoke High Chancellor Valorous, his lips curling into a faint, mocking smile. "Home to a species that calls itself humanity." Soft laughter echoed around the table. Alyndra allowed herself a cool, detached smile. Since she was young, she'd studied the so-called lesser civilizations, and humanity was always portrayed as one of the most primitive. Newcomers to spaceflight, slaves to their emotions, ruled not by reason, but by fleeting feelings. "They are destroying their own world," Valorous continued, swiping the display to show scenes of pollution, war, and chaos. Driven by emotion, greed, fear, a blind love for power. Emperor Zarek nodded slowly. "The time has come for us to intervene, to extend our empire to this world." "Father," Alyndra spoke up, her voice steady. "Why now? Earth holds no resources we need." Valorous turned a sharp gaze toward her. "Princess, our empire does not merely seek resources. We are the torchbearers of enlightenment. For 5,000 years, we have uplifted primitive worlds, guiding them under the wisdom of Altharion. We liberate them," another counselor added, "free them from the chaos of emotion, from the shackles of love, from their delusions about freedom." Alyndra recalled her early lessons. Emotion was weakness. Love was a waste of mental and physical energy. A true Altharion acted only with logic and purpose. "You will lead the reconnaissance," Emperor Zarek commanded. "Infiltrate their society. Identify their weaknesses. Prepare the path for conquest." Alyndra bowed, not out of reverence, but to hide the sudden gleam in her eye. After 2 centuries of training, her moment had finally come. "I will not fail you, father." "Remember this, daughter," Zarek said as she turned to leave. "Humans suffer from a fatal flaw. They believe in love. They will risk everything for it, sacrifice everything for it. That is why they are weak. That is why they will fall." As Alyndra stepped from the chamber, Valorous moved beside her, his voice a low whisper. "This mission is no ordinary assignment, Princess. It is your final test. Succeed, and the throne will soon be yours." Ambition flared in Alyndra's chest. The throne, the ultimate prize she had dreamed of since her first breath. And now the key to it lay on a tiny, fragile world filled with weak, vulnerable creatures. "Humans," she whispered as she entered the preparation room, her voice cold with certainty. "Your world is about to change." Rain pattered softly against the tin rooftops of New Detroit, one of the last industrial zones on Earth still producing goods by human hands rather than full automation. Alyndra walked through the drizzle, feeling the cold seep through the Earth-made clothes she wore. No royal armor, no climate control technology, just an old gray jacket and a pair of worn-out jeans. "Primitive," she muttered under her breath, irritated by the humidity and the scent in the air. A heavy blend of machine oil, street food, and exhaust fumes. It had been 3 weeks since she touched down on this planet. Living among the humans she had been taught to see as inferior. Her mission was simple: infiltrate, observe, and catalog humanity's weaknesses, especially their defense systems and leadership structures. Unfortunately, her scout ship had suffered a secondary engine failure upon landing. Now she needed a local mechanic, someone skilled enough to repair the damage, but clueless enough not to recognize alien technology. "Eliot's repair shop," she read aloud, eyeing the flickering sign. A small, run-down garage tucked between 2 larger buildings. According to Intel, it was one of the best repair shops in the district. Reliable, but not high-profile enough to attract unwanted attention. A bell jingled overhead as she pushed open the door. Inside, chaos reigned. Half-disassembled machines, scattered tools, and exposed electronics filled every corner. The air was thick with the smell of grease and molten metal. "Be right with you," called a voice from behind a mountain of scrap. Alyndra brushed her fingertips across an old machine, analyzing its crude design. Human technology, clumsy, outdated, Yet there was something oddly creative about the way they pieced things together with so little. "Sorry to keep you waiting," said a man emerging from the clutter, wiping his hands on a grimy rag. He looked to be about 30 by human standards, a few inches taller than Alyndra, with tousled brown hair, green eyes, and a faint scar running along his jawline. A sign of manual labor rather than advanced medical care. "Name's Eliot. What can I do for you?" From her pocket, Alyndra produced a small device, an intricate control module she had crafted, complicated enough to impress but simple enough to pass as human-made. "I need this repaired," she said, her voice clipped and cold. The Altharian way of speaking. "Can you handle it?" Eliot took the device, turning it over in his hands with surprising focus, his eyes tracing every detail. "Interesting design," he murmured. "Never seen a circuit like this before. Some prototype from Europe or something." "Something like that," Alyndra answered, wary of his perceptiveness. Unexpectedly, Eliot chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that caught her off guard. "You don't have to be so mysterious. I don't really care where it's from. As long as you're paying, I'll fix it." His casual friendliness unsettled her. On Altharian, every interaction was transactional, every conversation a negotiation for power. "How much?" she asked, direct and businesslike. Eliot frowned thoughtfully. "I'll need a closer look. Might take a few days. But first, have you eaten anything? You don't look so good." The question threw her off. Why would a stranger care whether she had eaten? Was this some sort of Earth-style bargaining tactic? "My nutrition is irrelevant to your ability to repair the device," she said, her voice flat. Eliot just laughed, a short, easy sound, with no hint of offense. "Maybe, but this is my neighborhood. It's raining out. You look like you've walked a mile through it. So how about a cup of coffee? I just brewed a fresh pot." Without waiting for her answer, he disappeared into the back room. Alyndra stood there, uncertain, caught off guard by this inexplicable behavior. By Altharian logic, he had no reason to waste resources on her without a clear return. When Eliot returned, he held 2 steaming cups. "Here," he said, offering one. "Careful, it's hot." Alyndra accepted the cup, not because she wanted to, but because it gave her an opportunity to study him further. She took a tentative sip and immediately grimaced at the bitter taste. "Not a fan, huh?" Eliot grinned, noticing her reaction. "I can add some sugar if you like." "Unnecessary," she replied sharply. "I just need to know when the device will be ready." At that moment, the door banged open, and a little girl, maybe 10 years old, burst in, soaked to the bone. "Eliot," she cried, "my bike's broken again." Instead of being annoyed at the interruption, Eliot's face lit up with a smile. "Hey, Lucy, more trouble with that back wheel, huh?" The girl nodded, dripping rainwater onto the floor. "I tried to avoid the gravel road like you said, but I had to deliver medicine to Mrs. Jenkins, and that was the fastest way." Alyndra watched, analyzing. The child had nothing of value to offer. No money, no strategic advantage. By Altharian standards, she was a burden, not worth the effort. Yet Eliot knelt down to her level and said, "You helped Mrs. Jenkins? That's amazing, Lucy. Bring your bike in. I'll take a look at it right now." "Really? Thank you," Lucy beamed, her freckles glowing against her rain-soaked skin. "I don't have any money, but Mom's baking cookies. I can bring you some tomorrow." "Don't worry about it," Eliot said as he started inspecting the battered bike. "Just keep helping our neighbors. That's payment enough." Alyndra stood frozen, struggling to process what she was witnessing. This was not optimal survival behavior. This was not maximizing self-interest. What were these humans doing? Why did they act like emotional bonds mattered more than immediate personal gain? "You can come back tomorrow," Eliot said, glancing over at Alyndra as he tightened a bolt. "I'll take a closer look at your device after I get Lucy back on the road." "You're prioritizing a worthless bicycle over my equipment?" she asked, unable to hide her astonishment. Eliot looked up at her, and for the first time, there was a quiet seriousness in his green eyes. "Lucy needs her bike to help people in this neighborhood," he said simply. "There's nothing worthless about that." A strange feeling stirred in Alyndra's chest, something she couldn't name. It wasn't anger, it wasn't annoyance. It was something dangerously close to shame. Number Altharians didn't feel shame, It had to be something else. "Tomorrow then," she said briskly, turning and stepping back out into the rain. As she pulled her jacket tighter against the chill, Alyndra glanced back through the rain-streaked window. Inside, Eliot and Lucy laughed together, bright, unguarded, genuine. Their laughter echoed in her mind, like a sound from another world. "Foolish," she muttered, raising her collar against the storm. "Let's see how well that kindness serves you when the Empire comes." But deep inside her, a dangerous question had begun to take root, one she dared not speak aloud. Why did these fragile, short-lived, imperfect creatures seem so much happier than the people of her perfect, mighty empire? The rain didn't stop in New Detroit for 3 straight days. Every day, Alyndra returned to Eliot's repair shop, only to be told the same thing. "It's more complicated than I thought." And every time, she endured watching him cheerfully help other customers, some who paid less than she did, and some who didn't pay at all. By the 4th day, the skies finally cleared, but Alyndra's temporary apartment lost power. An unexpected outage, according to the building manager. No climate control, no light, no hot water. "Primitive," she muttered, storming into Eliot's shop in a foul mood. "Is my device ready yet?" Eliot looked up from his workbench, his face smudged with grease, but his green eyes bright. "Almost there," he said. "I figured out the issue with the main control circuit. Oh, pretty clever, actually. The way the sub-circuits are wired in parallel instead of series." Alyndra didn't acknowledge the compliment. To her, it was basic Altharian engineering. "When will it be finished?" she asked curtly. "Tomorrow, definitely by tomorrow," Eliot promised. He studied her for a moment, then frowned slightly. "You okay? You look, a little pale." "I'm fine," Alyndra snapped. But even as she said it, her stomach growled in protest. She had been surviving on Altharian nutrient capsules for the past 3 days, supplies that were now almost depleted, and Earth food was still a foreign concept. Eliot heard the noise and checked his watch. "It's after 6, he said. "I'm guessing you haven't had dinner yet." "That's irrelevant to your work," Alyndra replied stiffly. "Maybe," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But I'm hungry and I'm about to close up shop. So unless you've got better plans?" He left the invitation hanging in the air. Alyndra was about to refuse, but her stomach rebelled again. "I am unfamiliar with the local restaurants," she admitted reluctantly. "Lucky for you," Eliot grinned. "I know a great place a few blocks from here, and the owner owes me a favor for fixing his fridge last week." Alyndra gave a stiff nod. This would be an opportunity to observe human social behavior, important intel for her mission. That was the only reason she agreed, she told herself. But instead of a fancy restaurant, Eliot led her to a small street-side sandwich stand, where an older man with a wide smile grilled meat over a sizzling iron plate. "Marco!" Eliot called out. "Got 2 hungry customers today." "Eliot!" the man boomed in thickly accented English. "New girlfriend? Beautiful. 2 house specials coming up." Alyndra felt heat rise to her cheeks, a strange sensation she didn't understand. "I'm not..." "Just a friend, Marco," Eliot said quickly, laughing. "She's a client." They sat at a tiny metal table near the grill. Marco soon brought over 2 massive sandwiches stuffed with steaming meat and fresh vegetables, plus 2 cold beers. "Buon appetito," Marco said, clapping Eliot on the back. "On the house." Fridge never ran better. As Marco bustled away, Alyndra eyed the food suspiciously. "Why would he give us free food?" she asked. Eliot shrugged, taking a huge bite. "I fixed his fridge when he couldn't afford a new one. Didn't charge him. When I first moved here, he used to feed me when I had nothing." "But that doesn't make sense economically," Alyndra argued, still staring at her untouched sandwich. "You spent time and resources. He lost product. Neither of you maximize your profit." Eliot paused mid-bite, then set his sandwich down and looked at her curiously. "You're not from around here, are you?" Alyndra stiffened. Had she exposed herself? "I come from far away," she said carefully. "Figured," Eliot said, smiling easily. "Listen, not everything's about profit. Marco helped me when I needed it. I helped him when he needed it. That's how we build community around here. especially with the world falling apart like it is. Alyndra picked up the sandwich and took a small, cautious bite. A burst of flavor exploded across her tongue. Savory, sweet, spicy, all at once. Nothing like the perfectly balanced, sterile nutrient packs back home. Good, huh? Eliot said, noticing her wide-eyed expression. Acceptable, she said stiffly, taking a second, much larger bite. They ate in silence for a few moments, until Eliot broke it casually. So what do you do? With tech like that, you must work for one of the big core. Neuralink, Amazon, Tesla? Alyndra had prepared for this. Independent research, she said. I'm not authorized to discuss details. State secrets. Got it, Eliot said, laughing it off without pressing. Still, your device is seriously impressive. I've never seen circuitry like that. It's almost like... He trailed off, then shook his head. Never mind, sounds crazy. Say it, Alyndra pressed, feeling a flicker of unease. It's just... Sometimes it feels like I'm working on something made by a mind that doesn't think the way we do, he said, sipping his beer. Her heart skipped a beat. He was smarter than she had assumed, but Eliot didn't seem to notice her tension. That's what I love about my work, he said. Every day's a chance to learn something new. Just then, a child sobbing broke out across the street. A young woman was comforting a boy, maybe 7 years old, clutching a broken toy robot. But I need it for my science project tomorrow, the boy wailed. I worked all week on it. Without hesitation, Eliot stood up and walked over. Sorry to butt in, he said warmly, but I fix stuff for a living. Maybe I can help. The woman looked at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. We can't pay, she said quickly. I just lost my job and... Don't worry about it, Eliot said, kneeling to the boy's level. Let's see what we've got here. Alyndra watched as Eliot patiently listened to the boy explain his project, a robot designed to follow light. With a few quick adjustments and a small toolkit from his jacket, Eliot got to work right there at the table. So you want it to track light, huh? He asked, unscrewing a panel. I think I see the problem. Your sensor's tilted. You built this yourself? The boy nodded proudly. I added the light sensor myself. I wanted it to be smarter than the school kids. You did an amazing job, Eliot said genuinely. Just needs a tiny tweak. A few minutes later, the robot was reassembled and working perfectly, moving toward the streetlight outside. It works! It works! The boy cheered, hugging his toy tightly. Thank you. You're going to be a great engineer someday, Eliot said with a wink. When he returned to their table, Alyndra was staring at him, unreadable. What? He said, picking up his beer. You didn't know them, she said. They couldn't pay you. Why help? Eliot tilted his head as if she'd asked why the sky was blue. Because he needed help, and I could help. But you got nothing in return. Sure I did, Eliot said with a grin. I got a kid's smile. Maybe that kid will do something amazing one day. Maybe not. But for tonight, he'll go to bed proud of what he built. That's enough. Alyndra sat still, feeling something shift inside her, a small awakening from the long, cold sleep of her heart. You do that often, she asked softly. Help people without expecting anything back? I guess, Eliot said, finishing his beer. It's just what we do, especially now. All we really have left is each other. Alyndra looked down at her empty plate. For the first time in her life, something inside her stirred. Something fragile, something precious. Thanks for dinner, she said, her voice softer now. I was really hungry. Eliot smiled, not the sharp, calculating smiles she was used to on Altharian, but a warm, open smile that asked for nothing in return. Anytime, he said. Tomorrow your device will be ready. As they stepped out into the cool night, Alyndra looked up. Here from Earth, the stars seemed distant and faint, so different from Altharian's engineered skies. Do you ever wonder, she asked quietly, not daring to meet his eyes, if there are other civilizations out there, among the stars? Eliot looked up with her. Of course, he said. The universe is too big for just us. Sometimes I wonder what they'd be like, if they'd be like us, or completely different. And if they came here, she asked, I hope they'd be smart enough to see that technology isn't the only thing that matters, Eliot said, his gaze never leaving the stars. That sometimes the simple things, like fixing a toy robot or sharing a meal with a stranger, those are the things that make a civilization truly great. Alyndra turned to look at him. Really look at him, not as a subject of study, not as an inferior being, but as a person who might hold the key to the greatest lesson she had yet to learn. "I hope so too," she whispered. "I really do." Alyndra's temporary apartment was swallowed in darkness. She sat silently in the only chair, staring at the quantum communicator Eliot had unknowingly repaired to perfection. It pulsed with a faint blue light, the only link she still had to the Altharian Empire. It had been 3 weeks since her last contact with the Royal Council. 3 weeks living among humans, walking their streets, watching their daily lives unfold. 3 weeks of something slowly shifting inside her, questions, doubts about everything she had ever believed. The device beeped softly, signaling an incoming transmission. Her heart pounded as she reached out and brushed her hand over the sleek, black surface. A holographic image of Chancellor Valeris materialized, sharp, cold, his face as unyielding as carved stone. "Princess Alyndra," he said without greeting. Formalities were unnecessary among Altharians. "Your extended silence has concerned the Emperor." "My communicator was damaged," Alyndra replied, her voice cold and professional. "I had to rely on a local technician. It's only just been repaired." "A local technician?" Valeris raised an eyebrow. "A human? Repaired our technology? Absurd." "I simplified the circuitry before giving it to him," Alyndra lied smoothly, the first lie she had ever told the Council. "He had no idea what he was handling." Valeris nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Regardless, your timing is fortunate. The Council has decided to accelerate the operation. The Vanguard fleet will arrive in 72 Earth hours." Alyndra struggled to keep her face composed, even as she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. 72 hours? But that's not according to schedule. I haven't completed my full assessment report. "The situation has changed," Valeris said, his tone devoid of sympathy. "Our other observers report that Earth is developing a new form of quantum AI, one that could evolve faster than anticipated. We cannot afford to wait." Alyndra knew it was just a pretext. Earth's AI technology was still centuries behind Altharian standards. Why the rush? "You will transmit all collected data," Valeris ordered. "Infrastructure vulnerabilities, power grids, political hubs. Focus on high population centers, New York, Tokyo, Mumbai." "What does the Empire intend to do?" Alyndra asked, her voice no longer steady. "They're a young civilization. They pose no real threat." Valeris narrowed his eyes. "This is not like you, Princess. Since when do you concern yourself with the fate of a lesser species?" "I simply want to ensure we act within the evolutionary decree," she said, invoking the Empire's ancient law. "No interference with civilizations below a certain developmental threshold." "That decree has exceptions," Valeris replied icily, "and the Council has decided. The Empire will expand. Earth will be our next colony." Alyndra clenched her fist beneath the table, out of Valeris's sight. "And their population?" she pressed. 8 billion lives? "Numbers are irrelevant," Valeris said with a dismissive wave. "They will be redirected or restructured. We will optimize the planet's resources. Those deemed valuable will be preserved for labor or research. The rest," he left the sentence hanging. But Alyndra knew what he meant. Restructuring was a polite word for extermination. Eliot, Lucy, Marco, the woman with the broken robot, all of them erased. "I sense hesitation in you, Princess," Valeris said, his voice softening in a way that made her blood run cold. "Perhaps you've been away from home too long. Perhaps you've, grown sentimental. A dangerous sign." "No," Alyndra said quickly. "I am committed to the mission. I merely seek the optimal strategy." "Good," Valeris said with a chilling smile, "because the Emperor has a special message for you. If you succeed in facilitating a swift and efficient invasion, the throne will be yours upon his abdication." Alyndra's heart nearly stopped. The throne, ultimate power, the dream she had chased for 200 years. All she had to do was send the report, a detailed breakdown of Earth's weaknesses, a report that would condemn billions to death. We expect your transmission within 24 hours, Valorous said, not noticing the long silence on her end. Glory to the Empire. Glory to the Empire, Alyndra repeated mechanically. The hologram flickered out, leaving her in utter darkness once more. She sat frozen, her mind spinning, haunted by images. Eliot smiling at her over a meal, Lucy racing her bike down the street, Marco flipping sandwiches on a hot grill, the boy clutching his mended robot. 72 hours, and she whispered into the darkness. In 72 hours, it will all be gone. Alyndra rose and walked to the window, staring out over New Detroit. From the 20th floor, the city sprawled beneath her. Glittering lights, countless lives moving about unaware of the doom hanging over them. 200 years of training had taught her. The Empire was everything. Emotion was weakness. The sacrifice of lesser civilizations was a necessity for greater progress. 200 years she had dreamed of the throne, of supreme power, and yet now, standing on the cusp of it, only one question filled her mind. What will happen to Eliot? Don't be foolish, she whispered harshly to herself, wiping away the first tear she had shed in almost a century. He's just a human, a fleeting creature with a short, insignificant life. But deep inside, another voice, new, terrifying, undeniable, rose up. Is a civilization that annihilates billions truly worthy of ruling? Is a society that knows no compassion truly more advanced? Alyndra sat down again, hands trembling, and opened the communicator's control panel. Her report would decide Earth's fate. Every word she typed would be a death sentence, or a lifeline. She began, fingers hovering over the virtual keyboard. Earth Assessment Report, final stage. And there, she hesitated, her heart and mind locked in a silent civil war. The Empire or Earth? The throne or Eliot? Power or conscience? I have 72 hours to decide, she whispered, closing the device. 72 hours to choose which side of history I want to stand on. The knock at the door jolted Alyndra out of her nightmare-filled daze. She hadn't truly slept in 3 days, not since receiving Valeris's orders. 3 days spent staring at the screen, writing and erasing her report again and again. 3 days torn between duty and a terrifying new feeling swelling inside her. Another knock, louder this time. Alyndra, I know you're in there. I need to talk to you. Eliot's voice, her heart hammered in her chest, a strange sensation for an Altharian, a species who had supposedly evolved beyond such primitive physical reactions, or so she had always been taught. Go away, she called, hastily shutting down the communicator and covering it with a cloth. I'm not leaving, he said firmly. You've been missing for 3 days. No one's seen you. I've been worried. Worried, such an odd concept. Why would he be worried for her? They had no biological bond, no mutual benefit, no... Alyndra, if you don't open up, I'm getting the master key. I know the building manager. With a sigh, she crossed the darkened room and opened the door. Eliot stood there, hair tousled, green eyes filled with real, aching concern. You disappeared right after I dropped off the repaired device, he said without preamble. I tried calling. No answer. I've already come by twice. I dot. Alyndra searched for a plausible lie. I wasn't feeling well. Can I come in? She hesitated. The apartment was full of secrets. Altharian technology, the communicator, maps of Earth's vulnerabilities. But before she could refuse, Eliot stepped inside, holding a small bag. I brought food, he said, setting it on the table. Sandwiches, from Marco's place. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the city through the window. Eliot looked around, frowning. You live in the dark like this? Let me get the lights. No, Alyndra cried, but too late. His hand flipped the switch. Light flooded the room, exposing everything. Maps plastered on the walls, marked with notes about major cities' infrastructures, electrical grids, dams, telecommunications networks, and on the table, strange devices marked with symbols no human had ever written. Eliot stood frozen, his eyes scanning the room, then settling on her. Who are you? He asked quietly, tension threading his voice. Eliot, I can explain, she began, though she had no idea how. He moved slowly, studying the diagrams. This is a map of the power grid. That's a blueprint of the Hoover Dam. He turned to her, eyes wide. Are you a spy? Working for who? China? Russia? Alyndra couldn't answer. The lies refused to come. He moved farther into the room, uncovering the corner where the cloth had slipped, revealing the communicator. What's this? He asked, lifting the cover. The quantum communicator pulsed with a strange blue light, Altharian glyphs scrolling across its surface. This isn't Earth tech, Eliot whispered, realization dawning in his expression. I knew that circuit looked wrong, but I never imagined. He met her eyes. You're not from Earth, are you? Alyndra felt a strange wave of relief that she didn't have to lie anymore. No, she said softly. I'm not. Eliot nodded slowly, like it confirmed a suspicion he hadn't dared to voice. Where are you from? Why are you here? I'm from a place called Altharian, she said. After 2 centuries of absolute loyalty to the Empire's secrecy protocols, she was committing high treason, but she couldn't stop. A civilization thousands of light years from Earth. And why are you here? He asked, voice calm, almost too calm, as his gaze swept the maps and plans again. I was sent to assess Earth, she admitted, to find its weaknesses. Weaknesses, he repeated hollowly. For an invasion. She nodded, unable to say it aloud. Eliot took a long breath. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He didn't call the authorities. All the reactions she had expected. Instead, he walked to the window, staring out over the city lights, then turned back to her. When? He asked quietly. 72-hour, she whispered. Now, 60 hours left. 60-hour, he echoed, voice dropping. And nobody on Earth knows. No, he nodded again, calculating something in his mind. And you, have you sent the report? No, Alyndra confessed. I couldn't decide. Couldn't decide whether to sentence billions to death? Bitterness crept into his tone at last. You don't understand, she protested. The Empire is all I've ever known. I've dreamed of the throne for centuries. Glory to the Empire has always been my purpose. Centuries? Eliot paused. How old are you? 243 Earth years, she answered. He gave a short, humorless laugh. And after all that time, you still haven't learned that conquest and genocide are wrong? The words hit her harder than any blow. She had never framed it that way. In the Empire's language, it was expansion, restructuring, integration, clean, clinical words masking terrible truths. We were taught that young civilizations like yours needed guidance, she said, the defense sounding hollow even to her own ears. That your emotions and chaotic freedoms would destroy you. And after living among us, Eliot stepped closer. After seeing how we help each other, laugh together, fight and forgive, do you still believe we deserve to be wiped out? Not all of you, she whispered. The valuable ones would be preserved. Who decides that? Your empire? The ones who've never walked our streets, never seen a kid fixing a bike for an old woman, never tasted a sandwich made with love? His voice grew stronger, fiercer. They get to decide who's worth saving and who's not. Alyndra couldn't answer. Every word he spoke cracked the foundations of everything she had once believed. If your civilization is so advanced, Eliot said, now more sorrowful than angry, then why do they need to destroy us? Why not reach out? Why not help? I don't know, she admitted. And for the first time, she truly didn't. He stepped closer still, until only inches separated them. If you really believed we were beneath you, Eliot said, his voice low and achingly gentle, then why are you still here, Alyndra? Why haven't you sent that report? The question hung between them, heavy in the silence. Alyndra stared into his green eyes and saw no fear, no hatred, only honest sorrow. I don't know, she whispered, lost for the first time in her life. I truly don't know. I think you do, Eliot said softly. I think part of you sees that there are things here, simple, human things, that are worth saving. Alyndra felt warmth streak her cheek. She touched it, stunned to find tears, something the Altharians claimed to have evolved beyond. Look, Eliot said, I don't know much about your empire. Maybe they have incredible technology. Maybe they've lived for millennia. But if they can't see the value in diversity, in freedom, in kindness without expectation? He met her gaze, his voice trembling with fierce hope. Then maybe, just maybe, they're the ones who have something left to learn. His words struck deeper than any order, any doctrine, any crown she had ever dreamed of. "How much time do we have?" Eliot asked, grounding her back to the moment. 58 hours and 40 minutes, she said, glancing at the countdown on the communicator. "And if you don't send the report?" "They'll still come," she admitted. "But without precise data, they'll have to launch a full-scale invasion. It'll be slower. Maybe give your people a chance. A chance to fight with missiles and nukes against a civilization that can cross galaxies?" Eliot shook his head. "We wouldn't stand a chance." "Then what do we do?" she asked. And for the first time, she said we, acknowledging that her fate was now tied to his. Eliot scanned the room, his eyes landing on the communicator. "Is there any way to send them false data? To make them think Earth's defenses are stronger? Or that we have allies?" Alyndra considered it. It was reckless, dangerous, but not impossible. "I can try, but if they detect the deception, then you'll be punished," Eliot finished grimly. "What would they do to you?" She looked away. Erasure, body and mind, complete annihilation. Without hesitation, Eliot reached out and took her hand, a simple human gesture of connection, more powerful than any protocol she had ever followed. "Why would you risk that?" he asked. "For a planet that isn't yours? For people you barely know?" Alyndra looked down at their hands, hers pale and fragile, his calloused and warm, a perfect symbol of two worlds colliding. "Because I can't imagine a universe without you in it," she whispered, the truth at last spilling out. "Because after 200 years of existence, I've finally learned what the Empire could never teach me. That true worth isn't measured by power, but by the connections we choose to make." Eliot smiled, a simple human smile, more powerful than all the technology of Altharian. "Then we've got work to do," he said, squeezing her hand. 58 hours to save a planet." Alyndra nodded, feeling something fierce and beautiful rise inside her. Not the cold pride of an Altharian princess, but the warm, reckless courage of someone who had finally found something worth fighting for. 58 hours, Yakun, she repeated, "and we're going to need every second." 20 frantic hours raced by in a desperate whirlwind of action. Alyndra and Eliot worked tirelessly, building an intricate web of false intelligence, data on a fictional planetary defense weapon, doctored images of hidden advanced technologies within Earth's secret facilities, even hints of a covert alliance with another alien race. "Do you think they'll buy it?" Eliot asked, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion as they finished the final details. "Enough to make them hesitate," Alyndra replied, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Enough to buy us time. The Council will have to reconsider if they think this won't be an easy victory." Outside the window, dawn was breaking, the first light of the third day since their bold plan had begun. Only 37 hours remained before the Empire's vanguard would arrive on Earth. "Almost done," Alyndra said, feeling a faint glimmer of hope. "I just need to encrypt everything and send it off as an official report. That way, they won't realize it's..." A deafening explosion cut her off, shaking the entire apartment. The window shattered, spraying shards of glass across the room like lethal knives. "Get down!" Eliot shouted, lunging for Alyndra and tackling her to the floor just as a sphere of blue plasma tore through where she had been standing, leaving a smoldering hole in the wall. "Impossible!" Alyndra whispered in horror. "They shouldn't be here yet." But it wasn't the vanguard. Through the swirling smoke and debris, 3 figures stepped into the room, clad in the unmistakable silver armor of the Altharian Royal Guard. Each one held a plasma rifle, powerful enough to level a building. "Princess Alyndra," the leader said, his voice cold and mechanical through his helmet. "By order of Chancellor Valorous and the Emperor, you are charged with treason against the Empire." Alyndra rose slowly, fighting to keep her composure. "How did you find me? How did you get here?" "We monitored your communications," the second soldier replied. "Did you really think the Empire would fully trust a princess who lived among humans for so long?" Eliot stood up too, stepping protectively beside her. "And what's this?" the third soldier sneered, pointing at Eliot. "A human? Is this why you betrayed us, princess? For a lesser being?" "He is not lesser," Alyndra said, her voice shaking but resolute. "He has more humanity than all of us combined." The lead soldier stepped forward. "Step aside, princess. We'll eliminate the creature and bring you home. The Emperor offers you one last chance, out of paternal mercy. Return, complete your mission, and the throne will still be yours." Alyndra felt Eliot tense beside her. "My mission?" she asked. "To identify Earth's weaknesses," the soldier explained. "The Emperor understands your judgment may have been compromised, but you can still redeem yourself. Give us the information we need. Step aside, and all will be forgiven." Eliot turned to her, his gaze filled not with fear or anger, but quiet concern. "Alyndra," he said softly, "whatever you decide, I understand. I don't blame you." That was the moment Alyndra knew her heart. For 200 years, she had been promised power, glory, the throne. But no one, not even her father, had ever looked at her with the pure, unwavering trust Eliot gave her now. "Treason means death, princess," the leader warned, raising his weapon. "One last time, step aside." Alyndra looked from the emotionless soldiers in gleaming armor to Eliot, the fragile, flawed, courageous human who had taught her the true strength of kindness, sacrifice, and what it meant to truly live. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I will not step aside." The soldier shook his head. "A pity. It's too late for you now, princess." Everything happened in an instant. The soldier raised his weapon, but he wasn't aiming at Alyndra. He was aiming at Eliot. The bolt of blue plasma streaked toward him at lethal speed. Without thinking, Alyndra threw herself at Eliot, knocking him out of the way. The blast carved a smoking trench into the wall behind them, but both survived, at least for now. "Why did you do that?" Eliot whispered, stunned by her instinctive reaction. "Because you taught me what truly matters," she replied. There was no time for more. The soldiers opened fire again, plasma bolts tearing through the apartment. Alyndra and Eliot scrambled toward the door, but another energy blast collapsed part of the ceiling, blocking their path. "This way," Eliot shouted, pulling her toward the bedroom. "There's a fire escape through the window." They raced across the room, the heavy boots of the soldiers thundering behind them. Eliot shoved open the window, peering down at the rusted fire escape. "You go first," he said urgently. "No," Alyndra refused. "It's me they want. You need to go first." Eliot shook his head firmly. "I'm not leaving you." Another explosion rocked the living room behind them. The soldiers would be bursting through any second now. "You have to go," Alyndra pleaded. "If they catch both of us, there'll be no one left to warn the world." "Warn them about what?" Eliot shot back, desperation creeping into his voice. "No one's going to believe me about an alien invasion. They'll think I'm crazy." Alyndra grabbed his shoulders tightly. "My comms device, you can use it to send a warning to Earth's observatories. They'll detect the incoming fleet. At least people will have a chance to prepare." The pounding on the bedroom door grew louder, a sharp crack spidering through the wood. "I can't leave you," Eliot said, his eyes filled with anguish. "You must," Alyndra insisted, voice trembling but determined. "For the first time in my life, this is my choice, to do what's right." Another hit, harder this time. The doorframe groaned under the pressure. "Go!" she cried, shoving him out the window. Eliot climbed onto the first rung of the fire escape, then turned back. "I'll come back for you," he promised. "I know," she whispered with a sad smile. The second Eliot began his descent, the door shattered inward. 3 armored soldiers stormed into the room, weapons raised. "Stop!" Alyndra shouted, throwing herself between them and the window. "I'll come with you. Just leave him alone." "Too late, princess," the lead soldier sneered. "The human knows too much. He must be eliminated." One of the soldiers moved toward the window, aiming his weapon down at Eliot scrambling below. He took careful aim. "No!" Alyndra screamed, tackling the soldier. The shot went wide, blasting harmlessly into the wall. But her attack triggered the other 2. They raised their weapons, but instead of shooting, the lead soldier punched her hard in the stomach. The impact knocked the breath out of her, and she crumpled to her knees. "Don't kill the princess," the leader barked. "The Emperor wants her alive." Another soldier grabbed Alyndra roughly by the arm, hauling her to her feet. "What about the human?" "Terminate him," the commander ordered. The third soldier turned back to the window, but Eliot was gone. The soldier cursed in ancient Altharian, then fired several blasts downward, melting the fire escape into a twisted ruin. "Good," the commander said with grim satisfaction. "He won't get far." Alyndra struggled in the soldier's grip, but his enhanced strength overpowered her easily. "You don't understand," she gasped, her voice breaking with desperation. "The Empire is making a mistake. We can't destroy an entire civilization just because they're different." "That's not our decision to make," the lead soldier said coldly. "Nor yours. The council has spoken." As they dragged her out of the apartment, Alyndra glanced down at the streets below, searching desperately for any sign of Eliot. Nothing. Either he had escaped, or she didn't allow herself to finish the thought. "The ship is waiting on the rooftop," the second soldier said. "We need to leave before the vanguard arrives." They hauled her up the stairwell toward the roof. In the distance, she could hear the blaring of police sirens and fire engines, the familiar sounds of Earth, sounds that now meant more to her than any grand anthem of the Empire. The Altharian transport hovered atop the roof, engines already rumbling, ready for immediate departure. Its light-bending cloaking technology kept it invisible to Earth's primitive radar. "Get on the ship," the lead soldier ordered, shoving Alyndra toward the open hatch. She stumbled, then quickly caught herself, turning to take one last look at the city of New Detroit. The buildings, the streets, the lives of all those she'd come to know, blissfully unaware that their fate was being decided right now. "Move, princess," the soldier barked, pressing the barrel of his weapon against her back. Right then, a loud explosion shook the building from below. The soldiers turned sharply, weapons raised. "What was that?" the second soldier asked. "Main generator, maybe," the commander guessed. Fire from the apartment could have reached it, but Alyndra knew better. It wasn't the generator, it was her communications device, overloaded and detonated. Eliot had destroyed it. He'd severed her last link to the Empire. "Get on the ship now!" the commander barked, real fear creeping into his voice. "It's a trap!" But before he could shove Alyndra forward, a gunshot rang out, a sharp, raw sound that was almost primitive compared to the sleek energy weapons of the Altharians. The third soldier crumpled to the ground, smoke curling from a breach in the seam of his armor, the one vulnerable spot Alyndra knew all too well. "Drop your weapons!" Eliot's voice echoed from behind a rooftop chimney. He stood there, a simple earth handgun clutched firmly in his hands, crude compared to Altharian tech, but deadly in the right hands. "Stubborn human," the lead soldier sneered, turning. "You really think you can fight us with your primitive weapons?" "Technology isn't everything," Eliot said, advancing slowly, gun still raised. "You might have better armor and better guns, but you forgot something important." "And what's that?" the commander asked, buying time while the last soldier crept toward Eliot's flank. "We never abandon the people we love," Eliot said, his green eyes locked unwaveringly on Alyndra. Those words, simple, honest, ignited something fierce inside her. In a heartbeat, Alyndra twisted free from the soldier's grip and shoved him hard toward the commander. Caught off guard, they stumbled into each other. Eliot didn't hesitate. He fired again, the bullet striking the vulnerable joint in the second soldier's armor. But the lead soldier was faster. He fired a plasma bolt toward Eliot, forcing him to dive for cover. The energy blast tore a molten gouge through the concrete where Eliot had just stood. "Eliot!" Alyndra screamed, racing toward him. "Watch out!" The commander spun, leveling his weapon at her. "If the princess chooses betrayal," he growled, "then she dies like a traitor." Time seemed to slow as the plasma bolt launched from his weapon, streaking straight for her. Alyndra froze. There was no time to dodge, but a body slammed into her, shoving her out of the way. "Eliot!" He threw himself into the path of the plasma blast. The bolt struck him squarely in the chest. His body was hurled backward, crashing to the rooftop with a sickening thud that Alyndra felt deep in her bones. "No!" she screamed, a raw, broken sound she didn't even recognize as her own. The commander advanced, weapon still aimed at her. "This is the fate of anyone who stands between the Empire and its destiny," he said coldly. Now get on the ship, or die here. Alyndra dropped to her knees beside Eliot. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she pressed her hands against his bloody chest. He was still breathing, but barely. The wound was devastating. "Why?" she whispered, clutching his hand. "Why would you do this?" Eliot's eyes fluttered open, a faint, broken smile curving his lips. "Because I believe in you," he whispered. "I believe you'll do the right thing for both our worlds." "I can't leave you," Alyndra sobbed. "You must," he rasped. "You're the bridge. You understand. Both sides." "Enough," the commander snapped, grabbing Alyndra by the arm and yanking her to her feet. "The human will die, but you still have a chance. Swear loyalty to the Empire. Fulfill your duty." Alyndra looked down at Eliot, then over at the looming ship. Returning meant reclaiming her old life, maybe even seizing the throne. But it would mean abandoning Eliot, abandoning Earth, abandoning everything he had taught her about what truly mattered. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice calm and sure. "A wise choice," the commander said, misreading her completely. "Get on the ship." But instead of moving toward the hatch, Alyndra reached down in one swift, fluid motion, grabbing Eliot's gun. Before the commander could react, she fired, right at the exposed seam in his armor. The shot slammed into him, dropping him instantly, not dead, but out of the fight. Alyndra knelt beside Eliot once more, placing a trembling hand on his face. "I'm not leaving you," she said softly. "Not ever." "The ship?" Eliot whispered, weakly pointing toward the transport. "Use it. Warn them." A determined smile flickered across Alyndra's face. "Good idea," she said. Summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, Alyndra hoisted Eliot onto her shoulders. Step by step, she carried him toward the waiting transport. Each stride a silent vow, a reaffirmation of her choice. The hatch was still open, the engines humming, ready for takeoff. She carefully laid Eliot into one of the seats, then hurried to the controls. "You know how to fly this thing?" Eliot rasped, his voice faint. Alyndra allowed herself a small, tired smile. "I'm a princess of Altharion," she said. "I've been trained to pilot every class of transport since I was 50 Earth years old." Her fingers danced across the console, activating the systems. The hatch sealed shut with a hiss, and the floor beneath her feet vibrated as the engines powered up fully. "Alyndra," Eliot murmured, "if we don't make it..." "We will," she cut him off firmly. "I just abandoned an empire and a throne for you, Eliot of Earth. I'm not about to lose you now over a little injury." A faint chuckle escaped Eliot's lips. "Little?" "By Altharian standards, yes," she said, her gaze sharpening as the ship lifted off, rising swiftly into the skies above New Detroit. "Besides, this ship's equipped with a full medical suite," she added, tapping a sequence of buttons. "I'll stabilize you as soon as we're clear." The transport shot upward, soon nothing more than a speck against the sprawling skyline. Alyndra punched in a course, steering them away from the urban center and toward the rugged wilderness to the north. "Why aren't we leaving the planet?" Eliot asked, every word a struggle. "Because our work is here," Alyndra replied, dropping the ship low over jagged mountain peaks. "The Vanguard will arrive in 36 hours, but we still have a chance to warn the world." When they touched down on a remote mountain plateau, Alyndra immediately turned her attention back to Eliot. She opened a hidden compartment beneath the console and retrieved a sleek, compact device, the Altharion cellular regenerator. "Don't move," she said gently, placing the device over his chest wound. "It won't completely heal you, but it'll be enough to keep you alive until we find real help." The machine emitted a soft green glow as it worked, slowly knitting tissue together and staunching the blood loss. Bit by bit, Eliot's breathing grew steadier. "Thank you," he whispered, color returning to his cheeks. "So, what's the next step?" Alyndra turned back to the control panel, her hands steady with purpose. "This ship has a transmitter powerful enough to reach any system on Earth. We're going to warn them, all of them." "They won't believe us," Eliot said, trying to sit up but groaning in pain. "Aliens, An invasion? They'll think it's a hoax. Then we'll give them proof, Alyndra answered, glancing down at her shimmering silver robes. I'm proof. This ship is proof. And beyond that, she pointed to a small device embedded in the console. That's a military-grade signal scanner. It'll pick up the incoming fleet when they enter the solar system. We'll show your governments that they're coming. Working quickly, she adjusted the transmitter frequencies to match Earth's networks. I'll send the broadcast to every major military and government command center, she said. And if they still don't believe us? Eliot asked, his strength slowly returning under the regenerator's soft hum. Alyndra's violet eyes burned with resolve. Then we fight, she said. This ship is armed. Not enough to stop an entire fleet, but enough to make them understand Earth won't surrender without a fight. Eliot looked at her, wonder and admiration shining in his gaze. You're giving up everything, he said. Your throne, your power, immortality. Everything you ever dreamed of? Alyndra paused, then turned to him with a gentle smile. I'm finding something far more valuable, she said simply. She activated the ship's broadcast system and leaned into the microphone. This is an urgent message to all nations of Earth, she announced, her voice strong and unwavering. My name is Alyndra, Princess of the Altharian Empire. I am here to warn you of an imminent threat. As she continued the transmission, Eliot watched her with quiet pride. Here, in this once untouchable alien royal, he saw the true meaning of evolution, not in technology or lifespan, but in the courage to break free from old dogmas and recognize the beauty in what was different. And I do not stand before you as an invader, Alyndra's voice rang out, clear and determined, but as an ally. Because I have learned that the true measure of a civilization is not in its advanced technology or its endless years, but in its capacity to love, to sacrifice, and to stand up for what is right. As her message spread across the Earth, Alyndra knew the future was uncertain. The Empire was still coming. There would still be battles ahead, but for the first time in 200 years of existence, she knew exactly where she belonged. Beside Eliot, beside Earth, beside the values she had only just begun to understand. Kindness, sacrifice, and love. Things no throne, no empire, and no crown could ever replace. Night had fallen over the mountains when the ship's comm system began to vibrate with an incoming message. Alyndra had fallen asleep in the pilot's chair after 20 straight hours of broadcasting emergency warnings, beaming signals to the White House, the Kremlin, the United Nations, and every major observatory on Earth. The soft vibration woke her. On the screen, a message blinked, one she never expected to receive. It was from the Altharian Imperial Palace itself. Eliot, she whispered, shaking him gently. There's a message from the Empire. Still weak but healing, Eliot sat up carefully. The Vanguard? He asked. No, Alyndra replied, her mouth suddenly dry. It's from my father, from the Emperor himself. Her fingers trembling, she activated the transmission. A hologram burst to life, a stern, commanding figure. Not Valeris, not some faceless general. It was Emperor Zarek himself, his deep violet eyes, the mark of the royal bloodline, staring straight into hers. Even though it was just a recording, Alyndra felt like a child again under the weight of that gaze. My daughter, his voice rang out, cold but not angry. I have received reports of your betrayal, of your attack on the Royal Guard, of the messages you are broadcasting to that primitive little planet. Alyndra clenched her fists, bracing for the condemnation she knew was coming. I do not understand, the Emperor continued. 200 years of preparation, 200 years of molding you into the perfect heir, and now you're willing to throw it all away. For what? For a planet of primitive creatures? For a human? Eliot placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent show of support. The Empire has decided, the Emperor said. The timetable remains unchanged. The Vanguard will arrive within 18 hours. But now, because of your actions, they come not just to claim this world, but to hunt down a royal traitor. I offer you one final chance, my daughter, he said, his voice softening slightly. Return to the Vanguard when they arrive. Surrender these childish delusions. Return to the Empire. Return to your family. Return to your destiny. For a brief moment, Alyndra glimpsed the man behind the ruler, the father she had loved as a child. I have lived 5 centuries, Alyndra. I know how deceiving emotions can be. They will pass. This creature, he said, his gaze flickering toward Eliot, though he couldn't truly see him, will live what? 40, 50 more years. While you could live for millennia with our technology. Do not trade eternity for a fleeting moment. The message ended with a final decree. You have 18 hours to decide. After that, you will be hunted not as a daughter, but as an enemy of the Empire. The hologram vanished, leaving the cockpit cloaked in darkness and heavy silence. He's not wrong, Eliot finally rasped, his voice hoarse. Logically speaking. Alyndra turned to him, surprised. No, listen, Eliot said, forcing himself upright with a wince. With their technology, you could live forever. I'm just a human. I'll grow old, I'll die. I don't want you to give up your entire future for what? Alyndra snapped, anger flaring. For you. She shook her head, pacing the small cockpit. You think this is just about you? This is about right and wrong, Eliot. About a civilization that has no right to wipe out another just because they are different. She stopped, staring out into the starry night beyond the ship's windows. I spent 2 centuries in a society that conquered disease, conquered death, conquered the limits of matter. But you know what we never conquered? She turned back toward him, her voice cracking slightly. Loneliness, emptiness. In 200 years, I never once felt what I felt in just 3 weeks on Earth. I never once felt alive. Eliot stayed silent, letting her speak. My father thinks emotions have deceived me, Alyndra said, walking back to him. He's wrong. Emotion didn't deceive me. It woke me up. For the first time, I see the truth. She spun back to the console, her hands flying across the controls. The interface glowed red, emergency broadcast mode. And I'm never going back to that darkness, she said. What are you doing? Eliot asked, watching her. Sending a response, Alyndra said. One the whole Empire will hear. She stood straight, shoulders squared, the stance of a royal heir. But there was no coldness left in her gaze, only fire. To the Emperor, my father, she began, her voice unwavering. I have received your message, and here is my answer. She drew a breath. I refuse. I refuse to return. I refuse to stand with injustice. I refuse to uphold an empire willing to commit genocide for power and pride. Eliot stared at her, stunned by the raw strength in her words. You asked what I would trade eternity for? Alyndra continued. I'll tell you, I would trade an empty, hollow existence for a life filled with love, compassion, and meaning. I have learned that the true measure of a civilization isn't its technology or its years, but its ability to see beauty in the different, its ability to empathize and protect, not exploit. She stepped closer to the camera, her eyes fierce and bright. If the throne demands I crush innocent souls beneath my feet, then I would rather die a human than live forever as a soulless monster. She paused, her voice softening. I love you, Father, I always have. And maybe someday, you will come to Earth not with an army, but with an open heart, and you'll see what I have seen. But until then, I stand with them. I will fight with them. And if I must die with them, she blinked back tears, then it will be a death far more meaningful than 1,000 empty years. With that, Alyndra sent the transmission directly to the Imperial Palace and broadcast across every communication channel in the Altharian Empire. You just gave away our location, Eliot said quietly, understanding what she had done. I know, Alyndra said, already working at the console. We've got about an hour before they trace the signal and send a strike team. Then we need to move, Eliot said, struggling to his feet. Not just move, Alyndra said, her fingers racing across the panel. Her eyes burned with a new, wild idea. We need to leave them something bigger. What are you planning? Eliot asked. The ship's reactor, she explained quickly. It's powerful enough to create an EMP blast. If I overload it the right way, it'll knock out all tracking and comm systems within 100 miles. It'll scramble anything trying to land or track us. You're going to blow it up? Eliot asked, eyes wide. Not exactly, Alyndra smirked. Let's just say we're going to let it go out with a bang. She set the sequence. 15 minutes, she said. Enough time to get clear. She grabbed a small bag, stuffing it with medical supplies, emergency rations, and a compact comm unit. This will let us keep sending warnings, she explained, even without the ship. You really believe we can stop an interstellar empire? Eliot asked, not doubting her, but wanting to hear the truth. Alyndra paused, meeting his eyes. I don't know, she admitted, but I know this. History isn't made by those who play it safe. It's made by those who stand up even when logic and odds are stacked against them. She helped him sling an arm over her shoulder. Besides, she added with a smile, the empires never dealt with anything like humanity before. They might be in for a surprise. They left the ship, disappearing into the dense forest. Nearly a mile away, atop a ridge, Alyndra turned back for one last look at the transport, the final link to her old life. 10 seconds, she said, checking the countdown. Any regrets? Eliot asked gently. Alyndra shook her head, never taking her eyes off the ship. Not about the choice, she said. Only that it took me so long to see the truth. The reactor detonated in a flash of brilliant green light. A wave of electromagnetic force rippled outward, silencing all electronics in its wake. That's it, Alyndra said, watching the light fade. They'll be blind for 12 hours. 12 hours to disappear. Disappear where? Eliot asked as they headed deeper into the woods. Somewhere they can't find us, Alyndra said. Somewhere we can fight back. Eliot chuckled despite the pain. An alien princess and an Earth mechanic hiding out in the woods, planning to fight a galactic empire. Sounds like a bad sci-fi movie. Alyndra smiled, gazing up at the endless stars. Maybe, but sometimes, the best stories are the ones no one believes can happen. As they disappeared into the night, Alyndra knew this was just the beginning. The empire was still coming. The fight would be brutal, but for the first time in her life, she was fighting for something real, not for tradition or duty, but for hope. And that, she realized, was worth more than any throne in the universe. 2 weeks passed. Earth would never be the same. Alyndra's message had spread across the world, gaining credibility as observatories confirmed the approach of unidentified objects entering Earth's orbit. What began with skepticism quickly turned into shock, and then something unprecedented, a global unity never before seen in human history. Eliot woke in a small tent set up deep inside a hidden cave somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains. Over the past weeks, his wounds had steadily healed, thanks to Alyndra's constant care and the alien medical tech she'd salvaged. The pain was still there, but it no longer threatened his life. Alyndra, he called, noticing she wasn't in the tent. He sat up slowly, feeling strong enough to stand without help. Dim light filtered through the cave entrance. Eliot stepped outside into the crisp morning air and stopped in his tracks, stunned by the sight before him. Alyndra was kneeling beside a strange metallic object, a small, heavily damaged spacecraft. How she'd gotten it here was beyond him. The rising sun caught her silver hair, giving her the appearance of a living halo. What is that? He asked, making his way toward her. Alyndra looked up and smiled. Not the controlled, measured smile of a princess of Altharion, but the warm, radiant smile of someone who had found their true purpose. Good morning, sleepyhead, she teased, setting down a strange-looking wrench. How are you feeling? Better, Eliot replied, eyeing the ship curiously. Is that? An old recon vessel, she explained, left behind during an earlier scouting mission. It crashed and was abandoned years ago. I traced its signal using the comm device we salvaged and found it buried about 10 miles from here. And you dragged it here by yourself? Eliot asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Alyndra shrugged, grinning. Altharians are stronger than we look. Plus, she added playfully, I had a little extra motivation. Eliot knelt beside her, studying the ship. It was much smaller than the transport they destroyed, barely big enough for two. Its silver hull faded and scarred from years of neglect. Will it fly? Not yet, Alyndra admitted, wiping sweat from her brow. But it will. The main engine's intact. Power cells are drained, but I can reactivate them using parts we salvaged from the transport. "And what do you plan to do with it?" Eliot asked, though he already had a pretty good guess. Alyndra glanced up at the sky, where 5 massive Altharian ships now orbited Earth, clearly visible even with amateur telescopes. "Keep fighting," she said simply. Eliot eased down onto a nearby rock, feeling a sharp twinge in his side. "I heard the radio," he said quietly. "The world's preparing. But Alyndra, they can't match the Empire's technology." "Not with what they have now," she agreed, "but with my knowledge, their weak points, their tactics, combined with humanity's creativity and refusal to give up." She paused, a glimmer of hope lighting her eyes. "We have a chance." "A small one," Eliot pointed out. "The smallest chances," Alyndra said, turning back to the engine, "are often the ones that change everything. That's something I learned here on Earth." They worked through the day. Alyndra with her advanced technical knowledge, Eliot with his hands-on repair skills and knack for improvising Earth materials. By nightfall, most of the ship's frame had been restored. Only a few systems still needed rebooting. Later, they sat by a small campfire outside the cave, sharing a humble meal. Emergency rations mixed with berries Eliot had foraged from the forest. Around them, the Appalachian woods grew dark, the stars blinking into existence one by one. "They're beautiful," Alyndra said, gazing up at the night sky. "From Earth, the stars seem closer somehow, even though they're actually farther than they look from Altharian." "Maybe it's because we look at them through our atmosphere," Eliot mused. "Or maybe it's because we don't try to conquer them." Alyndra chuckled at that. "Humans admire what they can't reach," she said. "Altharians are taught to conquer what we can't touch." Wonder was seen as a weakness, a primitive trait. "Well," Eliot smiled, watching a shooting star streak across the sky, "it sounds like you're getting a little primitive yourself." "And I don't regret it," Alyndra said, leaning into his shoulder. They sat there for a long while in comfortable silence, listening to the wind whisper through the trees, an owl hooting softly in the distance. "Eliot," Alyndra finally said, her voice low, "you know what tomorrow means, don't you?" "No one really knows," he answered honestly, "but I know we have to try." "Aren't you afraid?" she asked, looking up at him. "Of course," he said, smiling faintly. "But fear isn't always bad. Sometimes it just reminds you that you're fighting for something that matters." Alyndra thought about that. "Back on Altharian, we were taught that fear was an enemy, something to suppress, to bury," she said. "And now?" Eliot asked. "Now I understand that fear, like all emotions, isn't the enemy," she said. "It's part of being truly alive." He squeezed her hand in silent agreement. Night passed, and as the first light of dawn kissed the valley, the ship was ready. The cracks had been sealed, the engine hummed with a low, reassuring pulse, and the control panel flickered to life in Altharian script. "It'll fly," Alyndra said, standing back to admire their work. "Not a warship, but enough to get us where we need to go." "Where's that?" Eliot asked, slinging the last of their supplies into a backpack. "First stop, Washington," Alyndra said. "I need to share everything I know about the Empire's tactics with your leaders. After that," she glanced upward, where the Empire's ships still loomed ominously in orbit. "We'll see." Eliot climbed aboard the small craft. The cockpit was cramped but serviceable, 2 seats side by side before a complex array of controls. "You know," he said as Alyndra slid into the pilot's seat, "when I fixed that weird device of yours back then, I never imagined it would lead to all this." Alyndra laughed softly as she powered up the systems. "And when I first came to Earth to find your planet's weaknesses," she said, "I never dreamed I would discover your greatest strength." "What's that?" Eliot asked. She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with something fierce and tender all at once. "Your ability to change," she said. "Your ability to see value in what's different. Your ability to love, even when logic says you shouldn't." The engine purred louder, and the ship began to lift off the ground. "Ready?" she asked, hand poised on the controls. "Not really," Eliot said with a crooked smile. "But I guess that's the point of an adventure. You're never truly ready for it." Alyndra smiled, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "We may not have a kingdom," she said, voice full of quiet fire, "but we have each other. And the sky," Eliot finished, taking her hand as the ship rose into the air. They soared upward, threading through the trees, breaking free into the golden light of a new dawn. Below them stretched the endless green of forests, winding rivers, and the glittering lights of human cities, like constellations scattered across the earth. Above them loomed the Altharian fleet, vast and menacing. The fight ahead would be brutal. They might lose. The Empire might be too strong. But as Alyndra guided the ship toward the rising sun, Eliot beside her, in conviction burning in her chest, she knew one thing for certain. No matter what came next, she had chosen the right side of history. She had chosen love over power, compassion over conquest, and in a universe full of empires and endless wars, maybe, just maybe, that was the truest victory of all. Their ship shot into the morning sky, leaving behind a trail of pale blue light. A promise, a hope, and proof that sometimes the greatest revolutions start not with armies, but with hearts brave enough to love. Thank you for listening to The Princess Who Once Looked Down on Humanity. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts. What challenges do you think Alyndra and Eliot will face next? Can they truly change an entire empire? Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next thrilling adventure, where love and courage always rise above all odds. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.